So I have a question for you, Connie. Were you always this talented video personality, or is that something you had to learn to do?
Absolutely not. It is definitely a learning process and a curve, and I feel like it is a constant evolution. You only get better with time. You don't get to start as a pro. You don't get to start feeling comfortable on video. Honestly, video uh, at the start is very uncomfortable. It only slowly gets to be less uncomfortable as time goes on, and the
It
more you do it.
is. Totally, you're so right. It takes time and practice and learning. You learn so much. You've got to learn about shooting the video, editing the video, transferring the video, what people are looking for, what does well, what doesn't do well, how things work on different channels, YouTube versus TikTok versus Instagram. All of it is this huge learning curve. And it's funny that we're expected to automatically know how to do all that while also being knowledgeable about cars and also being able to tell a story that relates to the person who's watching the video, and we have no idea really who that might be. We think we know, but we don't always know who that might be. So it's a pretty big undertaking. It sometimes surprises me that people will start from scratch and learn to do it, though.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and that is exactly what our guest today did, Natalie Harrington, who came to CarGurus to write and edit and shoot video and tell car stories as a part of the CarGurus team. And I've loved getting to know her over the last year or so, seeing her out on events and getting to know her story. So I'm really excited to introduce you all today to Natalie Harrington of CarGurus. Hi, Natalie.
Hi, Scotty. How you
It
doing?
is so good to see you. I'm doing really well. It is really good to see you. I think we're ticking down here towards the end of the year.
Yes, I don't know how that happened so fast, but it did, and here we
I
are.
know, right? Right? It goes by really fast. And I feel like the last few months of the year are a whirlwind. We're really busy. We do a lot. We've got a lot going on. Plus, we have our own lives to manage at that time of the year. So I think it for me, it ends up being a bit of a blur, but a good blur.
Yeah, absolutely. With a lot of anticipation for the holidays and a lot of preparation for the holidays, in
Yes.
addition to all the other things we're trying to wrap up.
Yeah. So what does the end of the year look like for you? What kinds of things are you doing over at CarGurus towards the end of the year?
A lot of focus on what were our goals for the year and let's make sure we meet them. So, on the content team and editorial, we support a lot of different areas in addition to, of course, having our own mandate and goals. And so there's a lot of work with other teams right now and a lot of like road mapping for next year. And it's very inspirational. It really gets you kind of reminded of, hey, we're doing all this important work, and I'm really excited. And it's also like, oh gosh, a lot of things to think about at the same time right now, and a lot of urgent things. But
Right. Everything always has to be
temporary.
done. Right. It's like, oh,
Yeah.
it needs to be done now. But that's interesting that you're thinking about the goals that you've met, the goals that you can still meet, and then the things that you want to do in 2024. What's big on your list for 2024?
Personally or at CarGurus?
Well, at CarGurus, but also personally.
So at CarGurus, I am really excited that I'm going to get to be more involved with our organic social efforts. So that's something that's close to my heart and that I'm really interested in. It's not necessarily my biggest area of expertise, but fortunately we do have people for whom it is. And then I'm bringing the enthusiasm and the car knowledge and the willingness to get on camera. So I'm really looking forward to that. I think it's going to be a good challenge, and we're going to have a period of sort of proving that it's worthwhile, but we all really believe in it. So
That's awesome. So we'll see you more on the socials in 2024.
I hope so. That's the plan. And that
That's
actually
great.
aligns with my my personal plans too. I'm looking to do a better job of being visible and of sharing my sort of, I get a lot of, I feel like I'm in a privileged position and then I get this sort of insider access, not only to the new cars and the press launches and things, but also things like my work at the museum and the community that I get to be a part of. And I'd love to do better sharing that with other people. So that's
a
on
good
my,
goal too. That's a good goal too. And I do think, I feel like we're in such a difficult time with social media right now. But so many people just stay away because it's not fun. And I think if we all made an effort to get back to sharing the things that make us happy, and the things that delight us, and the things that we love doing, for us, it's a lot of cars, but I think whatever that is, whether it's, places that you go or recipes that you make, or, I finally figured out how to do something, so I'm not going to show you how to do it because it took me a long time.
yeah, that's key.
I think those are great things to share on social media. I'm going to take a cue from that. I'm going to try to be more active on social media in 2024 as well. I'll get really good at it, and then I get tired and I stop doing it. I take a break and then I forget to go back.
Yes, it's funny you say that because I'm very much in the tired phase right now, and you are my inspiration. So I'm like, Scotty's doing it. I should be able to do it too. I think you're doing such a great job.
So let's talk about your career though. So you're relatively new to the new car space, but you've been a car fan, a car enthusiast for a long time. So talk about, why don't you set us up a little bit. Tell us how you became interested in cars.
Sure. So I think it really came from my dad. He's a big car guy, and I grew up going to car shows with him. So that was, it was a really fun time. It was something special we shared together. But I didn't really start identifying as a car person until I'd say college, maybe even when I graduated. I remember developing more of an active interest in junior high and starting to really ask questions and learning to, actually recognize makes and models, which I just hadn't paid any attention to before that. But it wasn't really until after college that I started to think maybe this is something that I want to dedicate more time to, or even a career. Watched a lot of Top Gear and found the Lars Anderson Auto Museum shortly after I graduated. And that was pivotal for me in my experience as an enthusiast and ultimately in my career as well.
Where'd you go to school?
I went to Wellesley College, so outside Boston.
And what did you study?
I studied cognitive and linguistic sciences. So, the liberal arts thing is fantastic. And I really took advantage of that. And I took a whole bunch of classes that I was really interested in. And then junior year, I realized I need to put together a major out of these or I'm not going to graduate on time. So that was kind of how that major happened. I had taken a bunch of courses in different languages and in psychology and in psychology of how language develops, and it all meshed together into that major. But it wasn't necessarily intentional for my future career.
Well, I think it's the few people who actually do what they majored in, right? So that's a good education prepares you to do whatever it is that you want and need to do, not necessarily what you're trained to do. So that's okay.
Thank you. I take comfort in that. Thank you.
But it's very true. There are a few of us who do what we majored in. I majored in journalism, and lo and behold, here I am doing that, which is great. But there are so many people in journalism who didn't major in journalism, and so many people who majored in other things who never do that. So it's just sort of I think often a sort of a lucky accident, or maybe even just an accident, maybe not even necessarily lucky, that you end up majoring in something and then doing it. But then again, I also think there's so many interesting majors out there that'll prepare you for a great path, no matter which one you choose. But you may not really want to do that thing, sociology or whatever it is. So there's that too. But that's fantastic. So tell us about how you got started at the Lars Anderson Auto Museum.
Yeah.
And what that is, by the way, give us some background.
Absolutely. Okay. So Lars Anderson Auto Museum is in Brookline, Mass. So right outside of Boston. It's home to America's oldest car collection. So these are single owner, fundamentally, over 100-year-old cars that were collected by Lars and Isabel Anderson around the turn of the last century. And they're still in the carriage house. So now basically the elevated garage where they stored them from the beginning. They had their horses there, then they had their cars there, and now that carriage house is the museum. And I first went there, it was Studebaker Packard Day. They have these themed lawn events, and I went in 2010. People had been saying to me for a while, oh, you're a car person. Have you been to that car museum in Brookline? And I would say, there's a car museum in Brookline. Finally went, and maybe it's partly a function of the fact that it was Studebaker Packard Day and the sort of people who are specifically into those makes, but everyone was so welcoming, not just museum staff, but the people showing their cars were really excited to tell me about their cars. And I didn't feel at all out of place or as though I had to sort of demonstrate some kind of knowledge to belong or be worth talking to. And the carriage house, it's like this old castle. It's just gorgeous. I saw the collection of old cars in their original, unrestored, preserved but not restored form, and I just thought I have to get involved in this place. Like this feels like something that I really want to do more with. So I asked about volunteering, and that's how it started.
Wow. So you volunteered, and then you eventually became a member of the staff.
Member of the board. So I've never been on staff. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
So volunteered for, I guess it was 5-8 years, somewhere around there. And then there was a call for nominations for board members. And I thought, gosh, I'd really like to do that. That sounds important. And I think I could bring some value and a different perspective and a different voice to the table. So I nominated myself.
Which you should do. You should do that. You can always nominate. If there's something you want, raise your hand.
Yep. And got some friends in the community to support my candidacy, and they accepted me eventually. So it's been great. It's been a privilege and a responsibility that I don't take lightly, but that I appreciate.
And what were you doing in your career then?
In my career, I was working for a string instrument shop. So I had played violin as a kid from the time I was 4 up to the end of high school, and started working at this store in college my senior year, graduated into a bad economy, and basically just kind of clung to the job that I had and grew in that company, but really clung to it for maybe longer than I should have. It was a great group and a wonderful bunch of people, which made it a little harder to leave, but it was never going to magically morph into a dream job. And I probably should have acknowledged that sooner. I'm glad I got there in the end.
And that's what matters. That's what matters. I think recognizing when you're in the right place and when you're not in the right place is really important. It's hard to do, especially if you're mostly happy.
Yeah.
But so tell us how CarGurus, like all of a sudden one day, boom, you're on screen on CarGurus. Tell us how that happened.
Yeah, so I had that recognition that this is not going to become a dream job. I'm fortunate that my mom is a writer, my dad's an artist. So they're both very comfortable with the freelance lifestyle, and they really encouraged me that I could do this on my own. And they said, if you're not happy, like, you should make your own way and find something that does make you happy. So I left without a full-time job or a backup plan, and just knew that I could freelance. And then the goal was always automotive, but I was kind of taking whatever I could get. So I did a lot of writing in life sciences. And at the same time, having left my job, had a lot more time to dedicate to my volunteer and board member role at the museum. And that became a lot of writing, which got me into the New England Motor Press Association. And that is how I met Matt Smith at CarGurus, who is now my boss. So he asked if I had bandwidth for freelancing. I freelanced for 5 months, and then a full-time position opened up, and he encouraged me to apply, and I've been there 2 years.
That's amazing. And so now tell us what you do for CarGurus.
Yeah, so I'm the senior staff writer. So a lot of writing, of course, reviews and consumer advice articles, primarily reviews and overviews of different models, and video. So that was the new learning. That was not what I signed up for, and Matt was very, good about saying, "We'd love you to try this if you're interested, but I know this was not the original plan, and no pressure." And I thought, sure, I'm interested. It sounds like fun. Let's try it out. And I actually really like it. So that's been a really fun learning for me, and a fun new skill.
It's so funny because the world we live in now, like hardly anyone isn't on video, right? Hardly anyone doesn't have some sort of basic baseline video skill. Hardly anyone is unfamiliar with video, how to watch it, how to shoot it, where, everybody is walking around with a phone. So it's kind of funny that we still have this reticence or this maybe shyness towards something that is actually integrally so woven into our lives every day, right? So tell us about how you got over that. How did you break through and start shooting video and feel comfortable?
I guess, it wasn't that scary for me. I think not so much because that many people in my life were doing it, but more that it was pretty formulaic doing it through my job. I don't know if formulaic is exactly the right word, but there was a clear goal. There's a clear method. We have a videographer. It wasn't like I had to figure out both how to present and how to film at the same time. It's a limited ask at first, and then I had the opportunity to kind of grow in stages. So it wasn't that scary. I also had gone on shoots where Matt was presenting when I first started working there and been sort of the script supervisor. So I'd seen the whole process and seen him saying his lines or making mistakes. And it was a lot easier to have been through that as an observer.
And so you see what he's doing and you have that line runs through your head. Oh, I can do that. Right? Which is so empowering. Absolutely. It's so empowering. And I think very often we hear that voice in our head that says, oh, I can do that. And the first thing we do is shoot ourselves down. Oh, well, you don't know anything about that. Or you better be careful what you ask for. Or are you sure you really could do that? Or, and some people call it imposter syndrome, where you think, oh, I can't really do that. Or you accept a job and then you think, oh, I'm really not qualified for this. So what are you've come a long way in the 2 years at CarGurus. Now we see you out on the road and events and doing the test drives and asking the questions. And so tell us about what's your perspective on imposter syndrome and making that big change from, doing something that is not going to be your dream job to doing something that very possibly could be your dream job and maybe actually is your dream job?
Yeah. So I guess two sides to this. One is that I've made a habit, and it sort of becomes muscle memory after a while, I guess, of saying, yes, I can do that when there's an opportunity, and trusting that I'll figure it out afterwards. So that was critical to my career growth at my old job, and it's what's led me to this opportunity here. And I'm very grateful for all the encouragement I've got from my family and now husband as well. The other side of it is that I think imposter syndrome, a lot of it relies on this concern about what other people think. And I think there's a way to sort of flip that on its head and say, okay, these other people gave me this opportunity. Why would I have so much confidence in their knowledge and that they're going to see something lacking in me, and not have confidence in their knowledge and that they saw something that I could do and they put me in this position? So I think it's kind of taking the positives from that and trying to shut out the negatives. And also acknowledging that and recognizing that nobody's perfect. And the more I think you get to know any position or any coworker, you start to see them as a person and not as a perfect holder of that position. And you realize, okay, we're all just human.
Right. And, I think you make a good point. People don't hire you because they want to see you fail. They hire you because they want you to succeed and they believe that you will. And I think understanding that we all make mistakes, but we have to learn from them. Understanding that you can fix your mistakes after you've made them. So I don't know about you, but there's a lot of times where I review a video I shot and I go, oh, that's not true. That's not accurate. And so then it's a conversation I have to have with our editor and make sure that we fix that mistake, or that we don't put something out there that isn't accurate, or that doesn't represent the same experience the consumer might have, or whatever. So I think it's one of the keys is to continually be actively involved in your excellence all the time, and making sure that you're doing your best. And then still, things happen, but people forgive. So there's that. And I think knowing that people forgive helps as well. That certainly helps me feel better about, oh, that was horrible. Boy, I couldn't believe that happened. Oh, but people will forgive you. And
Yeah,
we all move on, right? We all move on.
agreed. And I think a lot of us are our own harshest critics, and it's important to try to recognize that too and say, okay, I thought that was horrible, but a lot of other people are saying, gosh, I could never have done what you just did. And I have to kind of sometimes accept that as well. And I'm happy you mentioned accuracy too, because that's something that I run into a fair amount with opinions, and that's been a big learning. Having to say, okay, just if I have had this experience with this car and it is not what everyone else is saying about it, it might not be that that's wrong. It might be that people who will have my experience are not super well represented among people who have a voice, but all
Right.
the more important to share my experience.
That is a very, very important point, because we are the outliers in the automotive content world. There are, for each one of us as women creating automotive content, there's probably like at least 100 men creating automotive content. And there's, for every woman who is behind the wheel of a car, there's, 0.85 men. So that's, yeah, a little bit of a imbalance there, I would say. But it's important for us to bring that voice forward. And I think you're right. You may not have the same experience everybody else does, but it's important, in my opinion, for you to share your experience and clarify it, articulate it. Tell us what, how what that means to you, what it was like, why it was important to you, because that's how the consumer will view the car as well. Or they'll have two perspectives. This person said this and this person said that. If you agree, if we all agree, we're not helping to shed light on other perspectives that, other experiences consumers might have. So when it comes, what do you think are let's talk about you reviewing cars. So tell us some of the common reactions you get from people when you tell them that you review cars for a living.
It's almost always, wow, that's really cool, or wow, that's a job, how do I do that? And I have a lot of advice for how you can do that, but yeah, it's almost always like excitement and interest and wanting to hear more, unless I'm talking to somebody in this world who does this for a living. Then they're like, oh cool, yeah, good for you.
Right. And what have you
Don't we
learned
all?
since you started working for CarGurus? What have you learned about cars and about how we evaluate cars and how we look at cars, and maybe about how consumers think about cars?
Yeah, I mean, gosh, I've learned an awful lot. I think I've really learned the importance of not just sharing the facts, because my colleague Elliot, our videographer, will often say, I don't think it's really important that we spend a lot of time with you just sharing these specs, because if they want to know, they can go look it up. Tell us what you think about it. which is really helpful feedback. Not everyone has the opportunity that we do to spend a week with a car and really get that sense of, okay, how does this fit into my life? And what is it like to do a grocery run with it? What is it like to drive it at night? Even on launch programs, we're often not driving them at night. You're not getting to see, hey, these headlights or something like that. So I think the value of my opinion has been something that I might have underrated before, and I'm maybe still getting comfortable with how important it is and how valuable and how firm I need to be about sharing it and sticking to it and not being uncomfortable putting myself out there in that way.
That is interesting because I do think when you're in a world like we are, where, like I said, we're 1 out of 100 car reviewers and the other 99 are men. They've also mostly been doing it a lot longer than we have, or I'm not a car enthusiast, so I couldn't like pick out makes and models driving down the road the way some people. I know people who can tell you what make and model it is just by looking at the wheels. Like they don't have to look at anything else. They can tell by looking at the wheels. And that's not me. I'm not that kind of a car person. But one of the things I found a little intimidating was how knowledgeable all these other people are, and thinking, well, they're so knowledgeable. Is my opinion valid? And I quickly came to the conclusion that, yeah, I have to do my homework. I've got to have an educated opinion, but my opinion is absolutely valid. And that's because it probably is more aligned with the opinion of the average person who will get in this car and drive it and have an experience than the person, because most people are just not that knowledgeable, not as knowledgeable as many of the people who we work alongside. But let me ask you this. One of the things that I find a little bit challenging is to streamline and what I call it like humanize my language and not fall into the you're going to shake in your head, fall into the pitfalls of all the car lingo. Because they, the car enthusiasts and even the manufacturers, they start to talk in engineering terms, and I can follow, but I pretty soon find myself going, okay, well, I'm just crossing that one off the list. I'm not using that term because like the average person will not know what those terms mean, or I'm going to spend all my time explaining what those things mean and not really talking about the car. What kind of challenges have you found in terms of kind of walking that fine line between the viewer that you represent and the industry that you're interpreting?
I think for me, it's been more challenging on press trips, like where I met you, because especially if I'm doing video on those trips, because I'm trying to balance this wanting to prove that I deserve a place here, that I belong here with everyone who, as you said, can be super knowledgeable. And I'm not someone who has that kind of encyclopedic brain where I want to be able to rattle off all the stats for, every year of this. It took a long time to get comfortable with the fact that that's not what appeals to me about cars, and that that's okay. And the museum community was really important for me, and realizing that there are many different ways to be an enthusiast. But yeah, to balance that feeling of, I want to prove that I belong here. I want to prove that I deserve to be on screen. I want to prove that I know enough that you should listen to me, but I also want to talk to a regular person and give them information that they need. And they don't necessarily need the steering ratio. They just want to know, how does it feel? Does it feel heavy? Does it feel light? Do I feel like it's appropriate for this size vehicle? So I try to focus on that, and on what my impressions are and really how I feel behind the wheel, because I think that's what people most need to know. The experience of getting press cars, being in that weekly rotation, has been really interesting in terms of, there are things that I will now say in my videos, like, okay, this is bugging me, but if you're not someone who's switching cars every week, if you're going to be behind the wheel this long term, you will get used to it. Or you might not even notice it, but I can't deny that it's there. And if you are the kind of person who's really sensitive to something like throttle mapping, then you should know this, but everyone else, forget about it. You'll get used to it in no time.
Yeah, I feel like that's important too, and I think a lot of times the enthusiast writers can get really down on a very specific detail and not recognize that, you know what, you'll get used to it. I like to call it a learning curve, and I say, you know what, that's just a learning curve. You know, once you get on the other side of it, it becomes muscle memory. It's your car. You've set everything up how you want it. Maybe you've set up your driver settings or you've personalized some other things in the car. You'll be fine. And if you do really hate it, then, you know, you've like 2-3 years into it, trade it for something else. You know, and buying a car is not a forever decision. You get another chance not too long down the road. You can trade that car in. But I think you're right. I think it's important that we not focus on justifying our reason for being there, or, you know, the value that we bring, and just focus on talking to our audience and sharing that information that will be important to them when they make a car buying decision. So look, I want to shift the conversation a little bit. I want to talk about your job, about your company. When I saw you, I don't know, somewhere along the way, you talked about an ERG, an employee resource group at CarGurus, and you were excited about a meeting that you were going to go to. Talk a little bit about CarGurus as a place to work, and maybe even compare to your last job. You know, what is it that brings benefit to your life in the organization that you work for?
It's very different compared to my last job, in large part because CarGurus is a relatively large company. It's, I think, maybe 1,300 people on our Slack right now. So large company, certainly compared to the string instrument store where I worked before, and the public company, which is just an experience I personally haven't had before. So that's but it's also a tech company. So you've got the corporate and you've got the pioneering, fast moving balance, which is really interesting. Content is a really small team. So I feel sort of like I'm getting to do stuff that I really love and enthusiast stuff. Most of my colleagues are not, and a lot of them are not car people. That's often not what drew someone to their career at CarGurus. It might be that they're really interested in marketplaces or systems architecture, whatever everybody does over in engineering and sales. But I would say CarGurus really walks the walk in terms of employee experience, which is great. There's definitely an emphasis on treating every employee as a person, recognizing that everyone's personal lives come first, you know, making sure that people are taking vacation time and using their PTO and things like that. And yes, I'm glad you brought up the ERG. So I am the co-chair of our Women at CarGurus employee resource group, which supports women and gender minorities. Relatively new. I signed on in March. So 2024 will be my first full year running the ERG. I think that representation is really important. And it's part of why I love what you're doing with the Girls Guide to Cars. Having that explicit sort of space that's meant for a particular group, I think can be really, really valuable, because things like I'm the only woman in this room are not invisible, and it's sort of human nature to let that get in your head. And it's nice to have a spot where you're not the only woman in the room and you feel like it's designed for you. It makes it a little bit easier to be your whole self.
And what kind of goals or opportunities does your ERG have? What value do you hope people will take away?
So we are there to support culture, community, commerce. We have these pillars, and to provide networking opportunities, to provide community for our colleagues who are women and gender minorities. So we try to bring a lot of value in terms of trainings, and we did a self-defense workshop. We've had outside speakers come in and talk about things like speaking with confidence or handling difficult sales calls and things like that, aimed at sort of different departments. We've done panels with our chief marketing officer, our VP of investor relations, and some other sort of higher up women talking about their experiences with the company, hoping to do one about pursuing higher education while at work and the choice to do that, maybe hoping to do one about different people's experiences with having kids, not having kids, taking maternity leave, things like that. So just trying to touch on all of those elements. The other important thing about the ERG is that we're there as advocates. So the idea is that we can work with the DEIB council at the company and with HR and with senior management to help ensure that we're retaining women, that women are having a good experience at the company, that there aren't issues people aren't aware of that we could be addressing and aren't.
Right. So, for instance, if someone said, I mean, here's like sort of an age-old one. I need some place to pump breast milk that's private, and there's no place to do it, and then you could advocate for that person, or whatever those. But you were in the position to hear the conversation, to direct the conversation, and then help people find solutions. And so you're sort of in that middle space between the employees and the leadership to help that happen. That's fantastic. Do you like it?
I do. I do really like it. Yes, we are in a phase right now where we're collecting feedback on how this year went for next year. So I'm really excited to hear about that and see, not just where people think we're doing well, but where can we do more and where should we focus our efforts as we plan for 2024. But it's really a privilege and fun.
And so where do you see your career going? What do you hope for the future?
That's a really good question. And I know I alluded to this earlier that I tend to be someone who says yes to opportunities. So I almost don't want to paint myself into a corner here. But one thing that I really want to do is start my own podcast. That's something that I'm planning, hopefully in the short term, because I've learned through particularly going on press trips that I love talking to people. I actually did not know until starting this job that I am a textbook extrovert, and I want to share that. As I mentioned earlier, I have a lot of access, and I get to talk to people who have just incredible stories and different aspects of car culture that they love. Not everyone is an enthusiast in the same way. I think a lot of women in particular maybe just aren't car people because they've never seen it as something that's for them. It just seems like it's for someone else. And that might be why it took me so long to come to it and then ultimately find that it is a true passion. So I see a podcast as an opportunity to really share this experience and maybe get some more people interested. I'd love to dig into, okay, so I have a sibling. What is it that makes me a car person and not her, even though we both grew up with my dad going to car shows? So that's something that I'm hoping to pursue, and I'm interested in seeing where that takes me. I also would really love to be doing more enthusiast related things. So CarGurus is very focused on consumer advice and car reviews, and not a lot on the car culture. And that's something that I personally am really interested in and would love to either develop the editorial verticals at CarGurus or do more on my own, which I think I could.
Yeah. Well, and I will say, I thought that I won't say being a car enthusiast, but being a car person, it had to mean that you would have grease under your fingernails, right? And that's absolutely not true. You don't ever need to change a tire. You do not ever need to change the oil in your car. You need to know how it's done. And I think there's a lot to be said for understanding it and letting that knowledge empower you rather than letting that knowledge leave grease under your fingernails. So there's room for all of that. If you are the kind of person who wants to, spend your weekends in the garage fixing your car, modifying it, whatever it is that you're doing to it, that's great. And I do know people who do that, and I have tremendous, and women, and I have tremendous respect for them. I also know that is not me. That is not me at all. For me, the big thing is like to take my car and run it through the car wash. That's about it. But or take it to the mechanic for needed service. But it's important to know that. I love that you have a podcast at the top of your list. That's amazing.
Well, I thought about a blog for a long time and it just hasn't happened. And even though I am a writer, sometimes writing can feel like a chore at the end of the day, and talking to people never feels like a chore. So
no,
I'm thinking,
but it's all the other stuff that's getting the post-production done and getting it scheduled and all that. None of it's easy, but it's all worthwhile, I promise you. So
I will probably be asking you for advice.
I have one last question for you. So your very young career has taken a couple of turns here, and all good ones. And you just got married. Congratulations. And I would like to know, what is it that you would like people in your life, your new partner, your spouse, your family, those people to whom we have to apologize when work makes our lives not so convenient, and those who see what we do is very public and they take a certain amount of pride in that. What is it that you'd like those people to take away from your career?
I think I'd really like those people and everyone to take away. It's such a cliche, but you really can do it. You can pursue something that makes you really happy and make that a career. And it doesn't have to be, they say do something you love, you'll never work a day in your life. It's not that it's never hard. And as you said, there are sacrifices. There are so many great things for me about this job because this is the right fit. And I really want everyone to find that right fit and not settle for something that feels like a slog, because we spend a lot of years working.
We do.
It's not worth it to be slogging for all those years. You can find something.
The grand irony is when you have other things that come into your life, whether it's children or bucket list travel or a hobby that you're really passionate about, work provides that balance. And you don't really realize that. I will say for me, the moment was, I love my daughters dearly, but when they were really little and they're babies and toddlers, and you spend so much of your life not doing all of the intellectual things you used to do. Sometimes it was process, sometimes it was meetings, sometimes it was just organization. And you don't do any of those things, and you feel like that you lose that muscle. You had that muscle, and now it's not there anymore, and you really miss it. And that at that point, you're like, I can't wait to go back to work. And it's hard because you want to do both, but I think you're right. You can do both. You can do both. Well, thank you for joining us, Natalie. It's so good to see you. And I hope that I will see you out on the road soon. January is just around the corner, and it's already looking like it's going to be an exciting first quarter in terms of new vehicle introductions, and lots coming down the road, a lot of electric cars, and the automotive industry never seems to rest, does it?
No, never, which I guess is a good thing for us. So.
It is a good thing for us. Thanks for joining us, Natalie. It's great to see you.
Yeah, you too. Thank you so much for having me, Scotty. I appreciate it.
Wow, I always love talking with her. I feel like, even on a video chat, it's like sitting down and having coffee with a friend. So tell me what inspires you about Natalie's journey.
First of all, I met her in person and I loved her immediately. We hit it off. We were both on the Toyota Tacoma Drive in November, and I spent dinner with her, I think the second night. Anyway, yeah, I think she's fantastic. She's a natural enthusiast, volunteers. She's on this museum board. And then getting to become an automotive journalist and writing and doing video about cars. I think she's just such a natural. And again, I just think she's a genuine talent and a great pro friend.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think she's a bright light in our world. She's young, and I think that she'll be, a natural automotive storyteller for her whole career. And we need more women like her, because you see her tell a story in automotive and you can see yourself in that car. And that's one of the things that's really missing in our world, is that we need more women to see themselves just as owners and drivers of that car, and not feel like, oh, I'm just going to drive the car my dad said, or my brother doesn't want that car anymore, so I'll drive it. That's how too many women end up behind the wheel of the car they're driving, and it's not always a good fit. And it certainly wasn't a choice. It was, it was a gift, or it was something that a choice that someone else made for them. And it's women like Natalie who help us to understand that we do have this power to make a choice for ourselves. So I really appreciate that too.
Absolutely.
So thank you for joining us. Thank you, Connie. Thank you, everyone, for joining us for What Drives Her, the podcast that talks to women and men who are changing the automotive industry from the inside. I guess we'll have to have a man here on our show one of these days. But we love talking to people who are changing the automotive industry from the inside. What Drives Her is produced by your hosts, myself, Scotty Reiss, and Connie Peters, as well as our producer, Jordan Allman, and edited by Steph Howard, music by Envato Elements. Please subscribe to What Drives Her on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or anywhere that you get your podcasts. Thanks for joining us, and we will see you next time.